Welcome again to Once Upon a Mormon, a podcast where we explore our lives and memories from our time in the Mormon Church. A warning to those listening, the contents of our podcast may contain discussions that are stressful or triggering to those who have experienced similar situations. It also reveals informations and practices that are kept secret by the church, such as temple ceremonies and abuse. Please reach out to us if you have any concerns at onceuponamormon@gmail.com. We acknowledge that some small audio clips of Mormon general authorities have been used in the production under the Australian Fair Use Copyright Act. These recordings are all available publicly from the church and are used for the purpose of criticism and review. We hope you enjoy our podcast and thank you for listening.
I believe the church is in better condition than it has been at any time in its entire history. My beloved brethren and sisters,
welcome to Once Upon a Mormon,
another testament of religious abuse.
So many have been hurt.
Persecutions may rage, mobs may combine.
Whom shall we go?
Sown in corruption. We need you.
Never again.
Welcome back to another episode of Once Upon a Mormon. I am Sister May and I will be presiding and conducting this Sunday school lesson. I am joined by my co-hosts, Sister Donna and Brother.
Well, funny story actually. I'm going to change my name to Brother Hiram because that's actually my temple name. I may have confused it between my patriarchal blessing tribe. So obviously that wasn't going to get me into heaven. And so I've had to repent of my sins, and now I can get into heaven because I remember my temple name. That's the only thing that matters. As long as you remember your temple name, they'll let you through the gate.
You got it. Good to go. Well, today's episode is, or I guess today's Sunday school lesson is all about tithing. So, Sister Donna, for those that haven't had much to do with the Mormon Church and some of the phrases and terminology that we use, how would you describe tithing?
Yeah, okay, so to all our visitors here today, tithing is the donation of 1/10 of one's income to God's church. So essentially, members of the church who want to receive all of the church blessings pay what is essentially a subscription fee.
To our pyramid scheme.
Yes, and it is 10% of your income, supposed to be your gross income too. So so basically it just goes to the church and they spend it on whatever they see fit. They tell us that this is to build temples and meeting houses and run church programs, and, goes to humanitarian aid and, helping people and stuff like that. But yeah, that's essentially what tithing is, and it's, everything in the church is voluntary, but unlike other churches where giving donations is sort of you give a little bit here and there, as you see fit, however much you can afford or whatever. In the Mormon Church, it's 10% and it is required. You have to pay that 10% if you want to receive all these blessings. So, yeah, basically that's how they do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. And, Brother Hiram, I believe there are other categories in which members can donate to. Would you mind explaining what some of those are?
I would love to. I want to cast you back a few years to when we had the paper slips that were very common. I remember as a kid, exactly. You used to grab a handful of them and run around the chapel with them.
Yeah.
So on these paper slips, right, they had, you put your details in and then you list under different categories how much you want to give to that category. Mm-hmm. So you've got tithing, which is the main one. It's some big bold letters at the top of the list. Mm-hmm. The next one is fast offerings. So for those that don't know, on the first Sunday of each month, Mormons will typically fast for about 24 hours, 2 meals. Then the money they would have spent on that food then goes to fast offering. So that way it's supposed to go to help those that are in need. And supposed to is the key word here. Other than that, they've also got ward missionary and general missionary offerings. So sometimes, I know for myself, I wasn't very well off. My family wasn't that well off, and so the ward helped pay for some of my mission because you're supposed to come up 10 grand. It's a lot of money. Okay. And so the ward helped pay a little bit of that. And then you've got the general missionary fund, which general missionary fund around the world. Mm-hmm. And then you've also got Book of Mormon printing. So, getting it in different languages, sending it out to the world, and then a specific one for humanitarian aid, which I would have thought would be covered in tithing, but apparently, people can donate specifically to that, as well as temple construction and perpetual education.
Yeah.
Now, these are all very mysterious, and I feel as though they don't get a lot of donations because it's supposed to be covered.
Well, you'd think that those things were covered by tithing, which it makes me really confused that those are separate categories, because it's like, well, what does our tithing money go to if there's already these categories for that stuff?
Exactly.
Yeah, that leads right into my next question. And where does it all go with so many members paying 10%? What happens to it? Where does it go? Like, that should be enough money to...
It's a lot of money. Like, do any of you guys know, like, off the top of your head, like, the number of members in the church?
For what I saw a little while ago, it's sort of at the end of 2021.
Yeah.
The membership, and I say membership lightly because this is just people that are on the books.
Yeah.
Was just over 16.8 million people.
Yeah.
Worldwide.
So it's probably like a bit less than that, but like, I mean, that's still a lot of people.
I mean, that doesn't take into account, how many of those are underage.
Yeah.
They're on the record, but they're underage. How many of those are less active? How many of those have left the church, but because it's such a difficult process to remove your records, they just haven't done it. So you never really get the true statistics, and that seems pretty common across the board. The church is very secretive with what they actually release to the public.
Yeah, well, like, it was a whistleblower in 2020 who said that the church owned $100 billion in assets, which is insane. Like, that is so much money. And yeah, apparently... so I think this was taken from 2019, but since 1985, the church has only given about $2.3 billion to humanitarian aid. So, I mean, yeah, like, only about 2% has gone to any humanitarian stuff, which is...
not a lot of money.
Really sad, yeah, because you think that all of this money that you're paying is going to a good cause. Like, I remember in the church kind of thinking, well... like, yes, this is required of me, and yes, I'm gonna, like, pay it because I want to be able to get to heaven. But also, how great is it that all of this money is going to be going to people in need, and it's going to be building up the church? Like, it's such a good thing to put my money towards. Like, I wouldn't even mind if I found out that the church wasn't true, because, like, the money's going to good places anyway, and it's helping people. Yeah. And then kind of coming out of it, I'm like, oh my god, I wasted so much money in the church. Like, they're not even using it to help people. What the hell?
Can I cancel my subscription and get a refund?
Yeah, I want a refund. Like, I worked out that over my life in the church, like, I've put at least 20 grand into
that's
the church.
That's a hell of a lot of money.
In tithing. So, like, and that doesn't even include, like, fast offerings and stuff. And I'm just like, man, like, how,
what I could do with 20 grand.
Yeah, what I could do, right? Like, I could have a nice car. I could have so many things. And
house deposit.
Right? Oh my
well, here's the thing about where this humanitarian aid goes. I'm going to pick at this one for a little bit.
Yeah.
So they say they spent, $2.3 billion in humanitarian aid in the last...
since 1985. So that's like, 37 years or something?
30-something years.
Yeah.
And so... the church actually has a number of warehouses around the US stockpiled with food, with supplies in case of emergency. They deem that as humanitarian.
Yeah.
How much money's actually gone to building these?
Yeah.
Because they're big facilities. They've got equipment. They've got staff. They've got people to manage it.
Yeah.
All this money is filtering into that. How much actually gets to the people?
Yeah.
Other
so
than just
probably,
stockpiling.
like, even less than that 2.3 billion is actually getting to the people who need it.
Like they say they provide like immunizations and food and water security to third world nations.
Yeah.
How much of that do they actually do?
Well, the church, like, I mean, these figures that, like, I brought up, like, they came from whistleblowers from the church. So the church, like, doesn't actually release to the public how much money they collect and then how much money actually goes out to those in need, which I think is really shady. Like,
well, it's been shown that a lot of money does get funneled into the church businesses where they build up their assets and they build up their shares. Like the church, I was reading an article in the Salt Lake Tribune where it says in the US, so this is just the US alone, the church owns about 1.7 million acres.
Yeah.
And that's worth about $16 billion,
Yeah.
which makes them the 5th largest private landowner in the US. Like, our tithing is going to buying stuff in the US and buying
like
land.
They own like cattle ranches, and they own, I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere that they own a mall somewhere. Like they own all sorts of stuff that you wouldn't even think of. Like being, you know, while I was a member of the church, I had no idea that they owned all of these things. And like it's just, I don't know, it's just wild that they have so much. And you know, they have so much, and then they also are so, like, they really do drive home that everyone has to pay tithing. Like, even people who are in absolute poverty, who really are struggling to pay for their basic needs, are told, you know, pay your tithing first, and then God will look after the rest. And, you know, the way they do that, though, you know, because they try and appear charitable and stuff. So, like, you know, people who are struggling will go to their bishop and will be like, hey, like, I can't afford to pay for groceries or whatever. And then instead of the bishop giving them money to get groceries, he will, like, you know, call up, you know, the women in the church, the women's organization leaders, you know, in the Relief Society, and be like, hey, can you guys, like, assist this family? And they will just bring it, like, and my family growing up, because we didn't have a lot of money, like, we've been on the receiving end a couple of times where we've had, like, hampers of food delivered to us.
Miracles
and it's literally
and blessings.
But it's literally just, like, all the leftover stuff that people have in their food storage that they don't want. So just, like,
here's your blessing. You paid your tithing. The Lord will provide.
like, just cans of beans and, like, you know,
what am I going to do with this?
cereal that nobody eats, like, just all
stale.
Yeah. Like, just all of this stuff, and you're just like, thanks.
Yeah, I remember being a missionary and having an investigator, a lady that we were going and seeing. She had run out of nappies, and so naturally we called the bishop, being like, hey, this lady needs nappies for her child, and being told to call the Relief Society. So we called them, and it ended up being a situation where we were just calling people, and they were just like, no, we don't want to help. Me being a missionary, you don't get much money. It's about $250 a fortnight to pay for groceries, and that's about it. I remember going to the shops. My companion was very strict. It wasn't P-Day. We were not going into the shops. I remember getting so frustrated by the lack of willingness to be charitable, which is something that I feel like the church pushes a lot. So frustrated that people weren't willing to help that I ended up leaving my companion at the front of the shops, which is a big no-no for those that don't know. Like, do not leave your companion ever. I told her, well, if she wasn't coming with me, I was going by myself, and I went and bought this lady nappies out of my own personal money to help her, because a child was in need and nobody cared, even though we are told as missionaries to push that the church is so charitable, and we have all this money to spend for charity purposes, and then having to spend my little amount of money as a missionary to help this baby in need. I don't think they were even 1 year old, and just I was just so humiliated by the lack of charity.
This is a shit thing, is that they're not giving the money to those who need it. They take the money and then they're like, okay, members, please help. It's like, what's the point of giving to some humanitarian aid if they're not going to use it for that? Like, you look at this, right? So they preach that leaders of the church aren't paid, but from area presidency and above, they're given a living allowance because they leave their careers. Fair enough, you know, they leave their careers. They chose to do that, by the way. They get paid over, this is US dollars. In 2014, it was raised from about $116,000 a year to about $120,000 a year. They don't get paid. They just paid a living allowance. I don't know about you.
That I can't do that because I'm a woman.
But I don't know about you, but it doesn't cost me $120,000 US dollars to live each year.
No.
I mean, that would be nice, but
and on top of that, like it hasn't been confirmed because the church doesn't want to release it. But it's also been rumoured that the church will take care of debts that these people have, and they'll provide them with housing, they'll provide them with food, all of that plus their living allowance.
Yeah.
These guys are living pretty comfortable.
Oh, yeah.
And that figure is just for like the 70s. It doesn't include the Quorum of the 12 or the First Presidency. Like, imagine how much they're getting to sit pretty over in a Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Must be nice.
Yeah.
They're charitable though.
Yeah.
Oh, so